Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Tangent Conspiracy. You have all been scanned, so it's okay. We've got your, we do have your genetic fingerprints. We got them as you came in the door, so everything is cool. Everybody's allowed to be here. No problems there. My name is Stephen Kovacs. I'm the curator here at V2, the Institute for the Unstable Media. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here and to introduce the evening. And I will be doing a little bit of moderation, and I will also be doing some online IRC moderation at that, where that yellow chair is over there. The idea to do a little evening on the notion of conspiracy came up last year during the film festival, when we were running a series of afternoon discourses on the way net practice kind of distorts our perception of our environment, of the way we live, and so on. And there was always this issue of truth coming up. So we even had one day where just the topic was about ultimate truths and things like this. And one of the major aspects of this discussion about truth was that it was always being connected to the notion of conspiracies and conspiracy theories. Now, of course, conspiracy theories and all this kind of storytelling around them is nothing new. It's been part of our condition and our various cultures basically forever. And interestingly enough, today in the Spiegel Online, the German online news magazine, there was an article about conspiracy theories and about the fact that the human condition is such that we need to have these. We're all drawn to them. We cannot somehow exist as humans without the desire to engage in speculation about events that we cannot perhaps adequately describe, and of course the fact that we don't trust the people who are telling us about those kinds of events. And what we're interested in looking at here this evening is how the internet works, not so much as, let's say, a receptacle and a vehicle for, let's say, expanded conspiracy theorizing, but that the very nature of this kind of, let's say, dialogue or event or happening is perhaps in a certain way catalyzed by the net, that the internet acts actually as a catalytic pusher to perhaps embellish or even create new and broader conspiracies. So there was just a slide up here on the side I just want to quickly show before we get into our guests. It was up a little bit earlier. And just two little images of, let's say, two of the most popular American conspiracy stories. On the left-hand side is an excerpt. It's a detail out of the famous Zapruder film of the Kennedy assassination from around 40 years ago, so in November 1963. But the object of the image is the flapping lapel of the man sitting in the car there, John Connally, the governor of Texas at the time, who was hosting JFK. There was a study made in 1993 and 1994 by yet another highly paid think tank trying to solve the mystery of whether or not there was a broader conspiracy behind the killing of JFK. And there's a whole number of stories around it, and the biggest, let's say, mystery or controversy is, was there only one shot, or were there more than one shots that killed Kennedy? And one of the aspects of that story is that this guy in the car, John Connolly, was also hit by the bullet that hit JFK. And if that was the case, it would have obviously had to have happened at the same time that JFK was hit, and he was wounded. And it seems like he was hit by the same bullet, but it's still inconclusive. And this study examined these two frames, frame 223 and 224, of this Zapruder film, and they found, after 30 years of all kinds of other people analyzing this sequence of film, that indeed he was shot by the same bullet that hit JFK, by the fact that his lapel flipped out at exactly the same frame that apparently JFK was hit at, indicating that the bullet whizzed by at that moment and grazed his neck. And somehow for 30 years nobody had actually seen this flopping lapel. And these two frames of this film were supposed to, after all this time, lay to rest the fact that, or the idea or the conspiracy or the notion that there was more than one bullet and that it was in fact one bullet that hit him. And again, this particular scene here has now become kind of the standard imagery of the JFK assassination, rather than the actual shot that hit JFK. In the image on the left, probably more people are familiar with that, and it's one of the most popular conspiracies today. It's the footage that was released by the United States government not too long ago of the plane which hit the Pentagon, Flight 77. So, as probably everybody knows, there was apparently two planes which were hijacked that hit the Twin Towers in New York City, one plane that was hijacked and crashed into a field in Pennsylvania, and the fourth plane that apparently flew in and smashed into the Pentagon and blew up. A majority of American citizens do not believe that there was actually a plane that hit this building, because nobody can ever figure out actually where the plane is. And the way that these kinds of film clips are presented to the public, of course, rather than quelling the notion that there was indeed, was in fact a plane that hit the Pentagon, by releasing a film clip like this that was taken with a security camera, it only creates new stories and much deeper and much greater conspiracy theorizing as to what actually could have happened. Because they do claim that it's quite obvious to see that there is a Boeing 757 gliding along the ground and smashing into the building. But in fact, all you see is a tiny little white streak and a fireball. So this evening, we're going to, let's say, diverge away from those popular myths of conspiracies and go into the practice of artists and people who do theoretical work with net culture around this whole issue of conspiracies. And I'll introduce them as they come up. But first, I'm just going to switch the screen over one more time. And this will just take a second. So yes, you have been scanned. That's all very good. And we'll pop on here to the IRC chat. Okay. So this evening we are streaming, we are webcasting the event, and we've got an IRC channel open, which we often do for these events, so the people who are out there, who are online, that they can also follow the event and comment and participate. But this evening, it's my pleasure to announce that V2 has once again a new chatbot. So we always used to have a chatbot in there, had a very special personality, and somebody who was also kind of like a catalyst for discussion online. And we lost the chatbot when our last system administrator left. And with it, a certain amount of like storytelling that comes out of V2. And again, the bot is a kind of conspiratorial character. The bot plays a very special role in the dissemination and structuring of truths and information. And of course, sometimes it's not quite clear whether there is somebody behind this kind of bot, what structures it, how does it get its information, how does it work. And so one of our speakers this evening, Tati Brasil, otherwise known as Claudia Borges, I'd like to invite you up just to say a few words about our new V2 chatbot.
So, hello. I called it this Joy, the chatbot. I tried to, I had this question, how would make the personality of this chatbot? If it would, a chatbot is something that it should emulate a personality or a human. But I really I wanted to be also, this chatbot also research on how to, what would be a conspiracy mind, or what is about conspiracies, how a person behaves towards conspiracies. So I'm going to talk more about it a little bit later, but then you have Joy online. She's going to be talking to everybody that's on the IRC, and I hope she's not going to be very, very disturbing.
Well, she does have a strange way strange way about her words. At the back, some of you've already seen, and perhaps you've already participated in a divination. We're lucky to have sisterO and her Algorithmic Oracle in the back. Maybe you'd just like to pop up here and say a little bit about what kind of strange and mystical, devious and underhanded things are going on back there. So, the Algorithmic Oracle.
Good evening, everybody. Well, we are examining this huge manifold of events that compose Wikipedia, and trying to use these events to reveal something interesting for us. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we're really happy to present here Media Divination 2.0, and me and my friend sisterO, we warmly invite you to come there and explore with us the manifold of time.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we can get down to some real serious and nasty business. Our first speaker this evening is Florian Cramer. I think probably most of you know him as the course director, the new course director at the Piet Zwart Institute in the Media Design group. Well, Florian, he had his, and I'm going to read the biography to you because it's quite nice sort of words about the workings of this man. He had his éducation sentimentale as a member of the Neoist cultural conspiracy. So this is a group that has been active and will be active in the future. And he's rumored to be involved in numerous other anonymous collective efforts. He has an interest in plots, networks, and signs that were brought to him through a study of literature and his investigations into networks. He works with speculative programming and, of course, cultural semiotics, which I think is going to be sort of core of what he's going to speak about this evening. And next to encouraging hacker approaches to information design, he also is currently researching, and this is interesting, the subliminal impact of obscenity on the human mind. So Florian, it's my pleasure to invite you and to have you give us the first insight into what the conspiracy is all about.
So this is very conspirative technology here. Let's see whether also the other part of it will work. Do we have a signal? No, we don't have a signal. Okay, here we have our conspiracy theories. And this is what I'm going to talk about in about 20-30 minutes, about political theology, semiotics, paranoia, the sublime, underground politics, postmodernism, overground politics, networks and media. This is roughly the field of conspiracy theories and cultural theory that I'm trying to sketch. So, speaking of political theology, conspiracy theories, they are quite old, as Stephen said in his introduction, but it's actually a modern term. It was coined by the philosopher Karl Popper, who might be known to you as a German-English philosopher of liberal rationalism in his 1930s books, Open Society and Its Enemies. And of course, that was a critical coinage because he was defending liberal society against totalitarian politics that were based on conspiracy theories. As a practice, conspiracy theories, of course, are much older. Well, for example, if we take the beginning of the 17th century, when the famous Rosicrucian manifestos were published as anonymous pamphlets, and immediately there was a huge resonance all over Europe, especially among academics who wanted to find out who these Rosicrucians are and what their conspiracy is about. After that, the whole concept of conspiracy was mainly applied to secret societies, like, for example, the Freemasons and, of course, the Illuminati. And then, since the 19th century, and this is where we get into problematic territory, to whole parts of the populations. Jews, if we speak of anti-Semitism, after 9/11, also to Muslims, and reciprocally, I would say, in Muslim countries, also to Christians, if we speak of political Islamism. So, what we could say, what we could draw from this, is we take this whole history from Gnosticism, Rosicrucianism to 9/11. I would say that conspiracy theories target gray areas between religion and politics. One could say that they are based on an assumption that just as in religion you have the exoteric, the visible, and the esoteric, the hidden, the same is true for politics, namely that you don't just have exoteric politics, the visible official politics, but you also have an esoteric politics, a conspiracy, the real politics underneath the visible politics. And if we take political anti-Semitism as perhaps the largest and most influential conspiracy theory, then also that there can be esoteric politics underneath both exoteric and esoteric religion. So what this means is that this whole field of conspiracy theories pushes us into the realm of political theory, and I'm a bit theoretical and abstract in this first section, but I promise it will get better. So political theology, this is a term whose modern understanding was coined by the enemy of Karl Popper, the right-wing Catholic and later prominent Nazi legal theorist and, by the way, brilliant intellectual Carl Schmitt. For Carl Schmitt's theory basically was that political power, modern political power itself, is just religious power in a different dressing. So that in former times in religion, the religion and the church had the command over miracles, and this shifts in modern society to the command over the state of emergency in politics. And he had coined this very famous sentence that those people are the sovereigns of a country that control the state of emergency. Very famous conclusion of his political theology. So in that light, in the light of Carl Schmitt's theory, one could say that conspiracy theories are kind of reverse engineered political theology, because they don't just describe that. They don't just describe how how religious power gets transformed into political power, but they actively apply those concepts by saying that there is something like an esoteric politics which is structured like a religion or like miracles underneath. To show that this concept of political theology is not just a right-wing Nazi racist concept. This is a famous book by G. Dioris Roberts, A Black Political Theology from 1973, which was one of the founding manifestos of the American Black Civil Rights Movement, and which hijacked this term of political theory and applied it to the black movement, making the strong point that there is the link between, for example, if you think of Malcolm X, if you think of Martin Luther King, or currently Jesse Jackson, that there needs to be a link between theology, between priesthood and politics in the black liberation struggle in America. So one could even say that it's not just about religion becoming politics or politics becoming religious again, but one could even say that religions themselves, especially the monotheistic ones, could be considered conspiracy theories, because there are grand conspiracy theories about the origin of the world, of who we are, where we come from, etc., and so on. We're giving one a coherent explanation of how all these pieces came together. And so if the religions themselves were the first conspiracy theories, then one could say they were conspiracy theories about nature, and what the modern conspiracy theories since about the 17th century are, they are conspiracy theories about culture, namely about politics, how mankind is working and not how gods are working. So with this, we see that conspiracy theories really are interpretations of science. In religion, it is an interpretation of nature, of the whole cosmos, as something that is symbolic. You can trace the whole cosmos, nature, back to the Word of God. You can decode it, and you can read it as divine writing, as the Bible, as the Quran, as the Torah. In modern conspiracy theories, it's also a reading and interpretation of science, primarily words, but also images, primarily words and images as they are reported by the mass media, to form a theory of a coherence and an all-comprehensive meaning. So that means what actually happens is that in a conspiracy theory, signs of totally diverse origins are pieced together, connected, and somebody makes sense out of them against a common sense. So you form a theory by making a particular and individual interpretation of science that you read. So as such huge webs of interrelated science where everything corresponds to everything, where each symbol makes sense in relation to another symbol, well, 9/11 conspiracy theories really are the best example, and where every little detail has a higher meaning, you could say that conspiracy theories are something like hypersemiotics. It's almost like literary scholarship, where you interpret text and science, but you do it in a way where you create an absolute coherence even from the most accidental details. And if you look at a novel like Umberto Eco's The Pendulum of Foucault, there you have precisely that plot where he talks about a giant, he makes the fiction of a giant conspiracy theory that involves the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and so on and so on. And of course, Eco, being a semiotician, describes this in semiotical terms because it all origins from a piece of paper that is the origin of the conspiracy theory, and in the end turns out to be a laundry bill. So we could say if conspiracy theories connect everything to everything and ascribe sense to everything which even doesn't have sense, then conspiracy theories turn into belief systems themselves, belief systems that combine semiotics and political theology, so we are thrown back into the whole area of religion. And I think that the best example for that is Illuminatus by Robert Anton Wilson, probably something a book you all know, which pretty much is a pop cultural postmodernist play with conspiracy theories. But if you are familiar with hacker culture, also Dutch hacker culture, you know that there actually in hacker culture are people who believe this, who took this book as their gospel and turned it into a new religion. First, this religion was half serious, Discordianism, and was meant to be parodistic, but there actually were people and are people who really believe this. So you have the classical example of how a conspiracy theory draws from religion and then becomes a new religion in turn. So if one makes sense of everything and anything and focus that on one entity, one conspiracy, one meaning, then using psychological terminology, one could call it paranoid or paranoid semiotics. Now, I don't mean this in a derogatory sense at all, or as a kind of, I don't mean it in as a clinical diagnosis, but I rather think of paranoia as perhaps the only form of irrationality that is perfectly rational, if not overly rational. Because what it is, it's irrationality that uses completely rational methods, logical methods, of drawing logical, coherent, and persuasive conclusions from observations and fact. So on a rhetorical level, it often includes seemingly unrelated observations and filters only out that which doesn't fit the theory. So it's something that is so rational that it becomes irrational because it cannot deal with irrationality. If you cannot deal with irrationality in the world and you try to rationalize every irrationality, then your own rationalization becomes irrational again and ends up as paranoia. And to prove that this is not a clinical diagnosis, this is the autobiography of Andrew Grove, who is the co-founder and longtime CEO of Intel Corporation, the chip manufacturer. And that's the title, Only the Paranoid Survive. This was his management motto as for Intel Corporation. And you can read this book and he explained why. Well, it's the whole computer industry and the whole technology industry, of course, runs on paranoia. For example, IBM and Microsoft are famous for their paranoid marketing strategies, which are popularly signified with the acronym FUD for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Namely, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that you spread about competing technologies, products, and manufacturers. So again, you spread paranoia in order to sell your product. Now, if we take fear, uncertainty, and doubt, they are emotions, they are sentiments, and they are emotions and sentiments that are dialectically opposed to rationalization. There we have the flip side of it. On the one hand, you make sense. On the other hand, you have fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So I would say these feelings of fear, uncertainty, and doubt describe really the aesthetic dimension of conspiracy theories. So what do I mean with the aesthetic dimension? It's the very meaning of aesthetics, or aesthesis in Greek, is perception, or sentiment, or subjective judgment. So since Greek rhetoric and since classical 18th century aesthetic philosophy, there is a specific term, a specific concept for fear, uncertainty, and doubt as an aesthetical mode, namely the sublime. And this perhaps illustrates it a little bit. In classical aesthetics, the sublime, unfortunately, I don't know the Dutch word because the English word is a bit weird. Can anyone help me with the Dutch word for the sublime? Huh? Sublime. Okay, thanks. The sublime in classical aesthetics is associated with forces of nature. Storms, lightning, dangerous mountain ranges and canyons, dark woods. And what we see here is a painting by Turner from 1842, which depicts a snowstorm, and you can see, perhaps you can see in the middle there is a ship on the sea in the middle of a snowstorm. And it is really a almost archetypical depiction of sublime nature that is overwhelming, and overwhelming natural forces that threaten the human being, which is in the middle of this. And what happens in the 19th century is that the sublime gets detached from just nature. If you think of Gothic novels, if you think of dark romanticism, up to the current Gothic subculture, then you see that the sublime and the threatening changes from nature to culture. And suddenly the sublime can be something that is man-made. It is not coincidental, I think, that large-scale conspiracy theories, such as the most infamous one, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is an original book cover, and it's the original large-scale anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Are very much linked to the categories of the sublime. Here you again have the threatening force that is taking over nature and threatening mankind. Because conspiracies and sublime work on the same level in that they're both infinite, branching out, threatening, overwhelming. So this correspondence between the aesthetics of the sublime and conspiracies becomes very obvious, I think, in Gothic murder mystery novels. If you think of Edgar Allan Poe, Arthur Conan Doyle, up to contemporary examples like Echo's The Name of the Rose, or very contemporary example, the Da Vinci Code, is precisely using this combination of murder mystery, Gothic sublime, plus conspiracy theory. And extending the plot from something that is just the plot, namely the story of a novel, to a murder plot, a murder conspiracy that then extends into political plots and finally into world conspiracies. And that throws us right into the realm of underground politics. You could say that in aestheticism, the sublime has always been identified with the anti-beautiful, the non-classical, and the anti-mainstream. And if we look, for example, at Gothic subculture today, this is just a picture I found when I looked for Gothic on Google image search. That's what I got. And then indeed, if you would make an analysis of it, you could see how much it defies standard classical beauty norms. And the fact that you still have a Gothic youth culture shows how strong the whole idea of the sublime as an underground aesthetic is still in our age. So if we talk about conspiracy theories, with their particular form of the sublime, you could say they really are, to a large extent, a countercultural phenomenon, because they are always underground as soon as they contradict official history. So what conspiracy theories do, they construct alternative realities. They disrupt the common sense truth because they come up with a completely different explanation of our current reality, show up the possibility of interpreting things radically different than in the official history, and could, I think, in the very best cases, be practical, philosophical, epistemological critiques, practical critiques or hackings of our understanding what truth and reality is. And because of that, conspiracy theories have been tactically employed by subcultures. For example, not only that politics has been analyzed as a conspiracy, but also that conspiracies have been invented or simulated. This here is the collective identity and media phantom Luther Blissett, who didn't really exist, but anyone could act in it in his name, and he was famous especially in Italy in the 1990s, and people staged media pranks in his name. So he's a prime example of how you can construct a conspiracy and also sell the conspiracy theory along with the conspiracy that you constructed. So it's both the analytical and the synthetical conspiracy theory, and the conspiracy that playfully refers to itself. And there we are in the realm of postmodernism, I think. There is obviously a high affinity between conspiracy theories and postmodernist thinking. Maybe we wouldn't have an evening about conspiracy theories here if there wouldn't be a certain postmodernist influence on this whole institution. I'm just speculating. But since the conspiracy theory creates an alternative truth, if you take conspiracy theories as a whole in their multitude, then they altogether say that there is not one truth, but that there are multiple truths. And that you can distinguish the different truths just by the degrees of how persuasive they are. So in other words, truth becomes a rhetorical device, something that can be manipulated, and for which not one secure, established model does exist. And the first philosopher who put it down in very precise words was actually not a postmodernist, but someone from whom all postmodern philosophers stole, namely Friedrich Nietzsche. And, oh, what is that? Okay, there we are. So that is the conspiracy of the technology. So in 1973, Nietzsche wrote a fragment called Truth and Lie, and the core sentence, the core paragraph of that fragment is, what then is truth? A mobile army of metaphors, metonyms, and anthropomorphisms. So metaphors, metonyms are rhetorical figures. In short, a sum of human relations which have been enhanced, transposed, and embellished poetically and rhetorically, and which after long use seem firm, canonical, and obligatory to a people. Truths are illusions about which one has forgotten that this is what they are. Metaphors which are worn out and without sensuous power, coins which have lost their pictures and now matter only as metal, no longer as coins. Okay? The full title is On Truth and Lie in an Extra-Moral Sense. So Nietzsche claims that he takes a perspective beyond moral at looking at truth. But I think this is not true, to stay in that problematic terminology. Because I think there is a morality, actually, there is a morality in Nietzsche's statements, because what he says is that truth cannot be trusted. And truth cannot be trusted because it's a rhetorical fabrication. And this, I think, points out where conspiracy theories can become problematic at the very point where you trust them and turn them into belief systems, and where you lose that awareness of them being rhetorical fabrications. And perhaps the best literary work on that, I think, is Thomas Pynchon's novel The Crying of Lot 49 from 1969. Which tells the tale of an underground conspirative postal communication system, which pretty much could serve as a model and inspiration for many subcultural communication networks and communication cultures. But in this novel, it is until the end not clear whether this conspirative underground post system really exists or whether it's only the imagination of its main protagonist, a woman called Oedipa Maas. So what this underground system does, it communicates the message of an alternate reality just by the fact that it might exist and that it creates its own mythological history. But Pynchon is not so stupid to just romanticize it and propose this as a kind of countercultural utopia. But part of this countercultural network is a neo-Nazi called Mike Fallopian, who is a member of the white supremacist Peter Pinguid Society. At this point, it's of course absurd, it's of course grotesque, but what happens is that the conspiracy plot is no longer romantic, but it really becomes a double-edged sword. You could say that conspiracy theories are no longer playful, or they're no longer critical, or no longer a way of hack reality when they A, create paranoia about certain groups of people, and B, turn into official politics. And I would say if you couple A and B, then you have precisely the recipe of the Third Reich in Germany. To a lesser degree, I don't want to make the comparison, but I think at least in terms of the logic of combining paranoia about groups and turning it into politics, this is true for extremist Islamism. It's true, but also for its counter-reaction, post 9/11 Homeland Security paranoia. And I think it's also true of left-wing anti-globalization movements, which pretty much operate with paranoid tropes like the capitalism, the neoliberalism, and in fact, you can see how this paranoia can turn into anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Again, this was taken at an anti-globalization demonstration in Seattle, this photo here, where you see a caricature of a devil that is both American and Israeli and Nazi and is it's Zionist pig. It's practically the same illustration that we saw on the protocols of the Elder of Zion. It's repeating that trope. So I'm coming to the end of my presentation. You could say if a conspiracy theoretical paranoia means to create a web of meanings and consider everything relating to everything else, then we really get into the realm of networks and network theory, what Steve also talked about in his introduction. Because if the network is a World Wide Web, then you already have a paranoid trope of linking everything to everything else. One could ask whether networks by themselves are structurally paranoid figures of thought, or at least they are figures that lend themselves to conspiracy theories. And the internet as the network of networks thus is the perfect embodiment of conspiracy theories, not just the medium, but also the subject of conspiracy theories. Nothing, I think, shows this better tonight than sisterO's and Andrea's internet-based divination performance. I just can strongly recommend you to get your personal oracle through a numerological analysis of Wikipedia and find something out about yourself. On the other hand, not only can the internet be used for conspiracy theories and considered something that has a paranoid structure, but it is also the subject of conspiracy theories and myths, and probably the best known one is the conspiracy theory that the internet was originally designed by the military to survive a nuclear strike, which actually is an urban legend. It's not true. There is a whole book which disproves this popular assumption, which was coined by a journalist who mixed up two different projects of the American Ministry of Defense. But this urban myth became so popular that it's now the big conspiracy theory about the internet itself. So, and no other discipline has spun this legend of the internet more often than media theory. And media theory itself, I'm afraid, is paranoid and a conspiracy theory to a large degree. Well, first of all, why is that the case? Why do I think that? First of all, because it really inflates the term of media and medium in a way that virtually everything becomes a medium. Yeah? If you read Marshall McLuhan's, it's, for example, light bulbs and guns and senders and receivers. If you read any media theory, there is no real definition in the of medium in the term that it is defined. That means that there are borders. Borders are drawn, what is a medium and what is not a medium. If everything is a medium, it is of course very easy to conclude that we are surrounded and permeated by media. But not only that, we are surrounded by media in a paranoid state of reality, but since Marshall McLuhan's influential assumption that the medium is the message, media theorists believe that a medium is not actually the purveyor of a message, but the creator. Yeah? In other words, that the tool has its own agenda, and that the agenda is embedded into the tool, and that technology is not something that is cultural and constructed, but something that has an agenda of its own, that is an autonomous agent, and which thus has taken over culture and is programming us. And this is why I'm showing this picture here, because the popular science fictions of Blade Runner, RoboCop, and Terminator are just the radical development of this kind of belief that technology has taken over. So what happens is that media theory itself turns into a belief system that puts the technology right at the place where the gods used to be before. And I think it's a dangerous proposition once it's no longer a heretic provocation, because if you look at the history of media theory in the 1960s or in the 1980s, it was first really pissing into the turf of classical humanities and making really strong, bold statements about media in order to challenge goody two-shoes humanists' assumptions about culture. But once these media theories became institutional doctrines and institutionalized, I think it is just as dangerous as a conspiracy theory that turns from a heretic play into a new belief system. So, to wrap it up, if we think on this evening of the media themselves as one big conspiracy, I hope that we can put conspiracy theories to a productive critical use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Florian, just hang on.
Okay.
Do we have mics up? Okay. We'll save the larger part of debate till after all the presentations, but perhaps just while we get Claudia up here, so we can come up and get your notebook hooked up. Is there anybody who'd like to send a quick response or question or retort to Florian? Oh, we got one back there. Just wait for the mic, please.
Hi, I'm Patrice. I'm just curious, as being a kind of marginal member of it, how the Dutch hackers movement has engaged and got itself into the Illuminati and generally into conspiracy theories with theological fringe and religious fringe, I would say. I'm just curious, so it's not a critique. It's curiosity.
Referring to media theory? Why I made the point about media theory, I didn't understand you properly.
No, at some stage you were referring to the Illuminati, the famous book by the latest version, the famous book by Anton Wilson.
Yeah.
And,
oh yeah.
And then you said, to my surprise.
Yeah.
Not entirely to my surprise, I must say.
Yeah. I come from Germany, and my main experience is that with German hacker culture, but it's very closely linked to Dutch hacker culture. It's really one camp. And in Germany, there was this very famous case, which even was made into a movie, by the hackers who hacked for the KGB in the 1980s. And they actually believed in the Illuminati conspiracy, and that they had to save the world from the Illuminati conspiracy, and were taking Robert Anton Wilson's book as their gospel, as really their Bible. And to be a bit critical, I really like Rob Gongreib as a hacker. I think he's a really good guy. He's also in the advisory board of Piet Zwart Media Design.
Okay. Thank you very much, Patrice. Good question, and thank you, Florian. I think we'll be taking up a few pointers on FUD later on. Oh, got it. For those of you who received our wonderful flyer designed by Roger Tubens, you'll see that the lineup includes, besides Florian, also Alessandro Ludovico and Hans Bernhard of Übermorgen. They will be up a little later on presenting, let's say, their artistic practice. Hello? Okay. But as the printers' conspiracies do go, like these are very strange mechanisms behind these things, our fourth speaker, who will be coming up, or already is up here right now, Claudia, was missed off on the card. So our apologies to Claudia, but she does exist, and she is here in the flesh. And I'll just say a couple words about you. That, well, you are from Sao Paulo, Brazil. You graduated in clinical psychology, and you had something of an official life that began as an artist here in Rotterdam. So it took this long move from Brazil to Rotterdam to realize that you had to get out of oil paint, and here you discovered the internet, if that could be an artistic practice. And as part of your practice, you explore women's issues, and you train and you design critical bots using female identity, language, and narratives. So therefore, joy. You've had to change your head? Yes? Okay. And your methods are highly unorthodox, as I'm told and as we hear. And you use the material of conversation and jargon as a means of information gathering. And right now, you are in a collaboration with this ethereal being known as Joy Evidence. Yes. So tell us about Joy Evidence. Claudia, welcome.
Hello. So I'm here to talk about joy, which is the chatbot that is on the IRC channel here. And I actually want to talk a little bit how I came to the body of joy. Because chatbots are like I told before, is like chatbots are historically made to emulate a person. You have actually to have the idea that you are talking with a person. And but when I was assigned to do this chatbot, I was thinking, well, to just make up a personality, and what would be a personality that would be very as conspiracy theorist of something that would be very much like that would do conspiracy or believe in conspiracies. So I decided to change a little bit my research, do a little research to know what kind of personality would be this chatbot. So conspiracy theories are filled with cliches. Chatting is a conversation, a quick conversation. Bots use prefabricated sentence to emulate humans. A scripted language, chatbots are made of assumptions and cliches. Much like lots of conspiracy theories, chatbots are fiction. Very often they are supposed to feel like a person, to have a mind of personality. The most famous chatbots have women names, like Elisa is the very, very famous one, and Alice, which just got a Loebner Prize. That means that that's the, they really believe it's, you can really believe you're talking with a person, when you talk with this chatbot. Gossips and conspiracy theories could be seen as counter-discourses, narratives to get around the official stories or alternative explanations for facts. Conspiracy theories often are far more interesting as story than as reality or truth. Chatbots are, in a sense, a fictional character and can generate stories throughout conversations. That's so what's Joy is doing in the channel. This is from a text I took from a text from the Geuze about their own bots. Just a paragraph. In between man and machine, codes attempt to emulate natural language. Scripts are translated through browsers rendering chatbots of various kinds, ready for input and exchange. The chatbot, as it is more commonly known, imitates conversation. It's a kind of sympathetic ear that can hear but not listen. In brief, it's a simulation of a chat based on a source code, propositions and keywords. Its structure is purely mathematical, a classic play of probabilities. So chatbots want to be seen as human. So a chatbot with a conspiracy in a conspiracy lecture should have a conspiracy mind. And the first thing you could think, like a conspiracy mind, would be someone that's paranoid, afraid, or having delusional disorders. That's the clinical name for paranoia. I was not very satisfied with the idea of paranoia, actually. Conspiracy theories have this halo of being stupid or untruth by excellence. They are legends, tales, folklore, just untrue facts. Just because you have this opposition, like the theory and the debunking of the theory. The debunking would be the facts. And also because whenever you say that something is a conspiracy theory in the media, you're labeling someone like it's an untrue story. And also looking on the internet, you get the impression that conspiracy theory is like some sort of hip hop of things people who don't feel that isn't right, and they try to make a more plausible story. This theory is like taking some sort of red pill, like a Matrix story. So people finally see that reality is a carefully engineering hallucination, and the non-believers just don't get it. Those who have taken the red pill believe, for instance, that actual world resources are in the hands of Rothschilds, the Masons, and the aliens all together, and they all operate throughout a mega computer in Brussels. And they're going to all rule the world. I even found a very strange thing. It was an alien film. It's totally stupid. Like, in a forum, and I found a forum. It was this film of an alien being interrogated. And what was really very amazing is that it was a forum. People were discussing how horrible they found that like the governments could do something so dreadful with such a nice creature, you know. And it was really like I couldn't believe that people believe on those things just because they are plain stupid. So, and I found a very nice text. It's from Bertrand Russell. And I'm going to read for you also. What a man believes upon grossly insufficient evidence is an index into his desires. If a man is offered a fact which goes against his instincts, he will scrutinize it closely, and unless the evidence is overwhelming, he will refuse to believe it. If, on the other hand, he is offered something which affords a reason for acting in accordance to his instincts, he will accept it even on the slightest evidence. The origin of myths is explained this way. And what I make of it is that it's to believe on a story or not is it's about a choice made on your instincts, in your gut feelings. And because I was looking very much into sources, just like the conspiracy theorist does, like sites like Above Top Secret, crank.net, Planet X, and there's a lot of all those sites on the internet, I decided that I wanted to make a research in another way, so I would make my own conspiracy. So I invited some people to talk with me about two main questions I had about this conspiracy mind, or how would I code a bot. And one of my questions was like, one is something about paranoid behavior, and one is something about critique. And the other question was, what do artists and activists and others could do with conspiracy theories? One of the people I talked with about it was an artist, and he's the evidence we talked. And he told me, he told me conspiracy theories often point to other issues at play, so they are interesting. In an ongoing photo series, I've been interested in the relationship between war infrastructure, the UFOs, and other myths about American Southwest. One of my trips was about the 60th anniversary of the first atomic test. Afterwards, I traveled 45 minutes and I was in Roswell. Well, Roswell, if everybody knows, is a very big UFO conspiracy theory. It was a powerful moment and made me realize that Roswell was an indirect result of the atomic test. Somehow a misplacement of anxieties caused by the proximity of the bomb and the cosmological, ontological issues that were caused. The idea that conspiracy theories would be very fruitful because it would be another way to relate to the anxieties caused by facts, or a way to make sense of the word of resolving anxieties wasn't quite feeling well for me, because the thing I thought was, what about critique? And one of the things I want to say about like this kind of dissolving anxieties, like the idea, I was very charmed about the idea of making sense of the word, because it's to make sense of the word is not something that people do passively. I think it has a lot to do with conspiracy theories, because it's just like you talk a language. While you're talking a language, you are complying with the rules of grammar, but at the same time you're negotiating with the rules of grammar. And that's somehow I got the idea that it would work a lot with making up stories to resolve some kind of like anxieties. The idea, so I want to read another little text. It was from Bruno Latour about critique. And it's like, what has become of critique when a book that claims that no plane ever crashed in the Pentagon can be a bestseller? The smoke of the event has not yet finished settling before dozens of conspiracy theories begin revising the official account, adding even more ruin to the ruins, adding even more smoke to the smoke. What has become of the critique when my neighbor in the little Bourdonnais village in France, where I live, looks down on me as some hopelessly naive because I believe the United States have been attacked by terrorists? What have become of critique when there is a whole industry denying that Apollo program landed on the moon? What has become of critique when DARPA uses for its total information awareness project the Baconian slogan Ciência es Potência? Did I read that somewhere in Michel Foucault? Maybe I'm taking conspiracy theories too seriously, but it worries me to detect in those mad mixtures of knee-jerk disbelief, punctuous demands for proofs and free use of power explanation from the social Neverland, making of the weapons, many of the weapons used by social critique. Of course, conspiracy theories are an absurd deformation of our own arguments, but like weapons smuggled throughout the fuzzy border of the wrong party, these are those weapons nonetheless. My other question was, how does this feeling of discomfort and anxiety could be fruitful? And again, what's one is something about alertness and vigilance, and something about paranoid behavior. And then that's throughout all this time, actually all those questions I was making to people who I invited to talk with me about those things. So and one person I talked about it, and it was very important to me to understand my question, was a philosopher called Wolfgang Schulze. And he said actually the boundary between alertness and paranoia is reality. Being paranoid would be being alert to something non-existent. And that is probably the true crux of the matter. The internet and digital media act as engines of fictionalization of experience, blurring established boundaries between fiction and reality. Therefore, also the distinction between alertness and paranoia becomes problematic. If reality is therefore not reliable criteria for distinction between critique and paranoid behavior, then we can either look for a new criterion or simply abandon the distinction. Then he talks very much. I found it very charming, this idea that you actually critique would be an exaggeration of alertness, but also something different. He talked very much about. I think about when I talk about exaggerators, think also about science fiction and all sorts of fictions. There are paranoid narratives that contain a critique of the status quo. Attention, based on the understanding that reality has become a void concept, and what matters is the amount of the duration of the attention, because we construct temporary realities focused on our attention. And here I would suggest that critique requires and allows more and longer attention, while paranoia dissolves the object that critical attention should be directed at. Therefore, people sometimes say that all paranoia is just a nuisance. Conspiracy theories would be child's play in the best cases, nothing to do with the real world, which is the world that demands attention and rationality and reality. Remembering that attention to the real is another way of saying rational, then conspiracy theories would be something irrational. But the thing is, we need the irrational, we need the fantastic, always to reduce the violence of reason, of rationality, of the real, which otherwise establish themselves as ultimate, unaccountable power against which there is no appeal, and that turned political life into buried life. Perhaps, therefore, a temporary answer could be that the difference between critique and paranoia is like the difference between reality, rationality, and fiction and irrationality. Conspiracy theories might be capable of correcting and inspiring critique that otherwise would not take place, because critique can never be a critique if it's just realistic. Then it would be a mere technical critique and optimization of the status quo. So without exaggerated alertness or paranoia, violence might become identical with reality, and like reality, no need for justification. I forgot to show other people I conspire with. There is also something that Latour says about critique. That's not the one that debunks things, but the one who assembles. The critic is not the one who lifts the rug from under the feet of the naive believers, but the one who offers and offers the participants arenas on which to gather if something is constructed, then it means it's fragile and thus in great need for care and caution. Well, feminist theories talk very much about what they call partial realities, and would fit very well in the idea of experiencing parallel stories or parallel explanations for the same facts. So, in this sense, actually, what happened is that Joy, this is a film. Joy is a chatbot fiction that, as a character, she tries to make sense of the world around her, is very, very alert, is irrational, sees connections everywhere, don't believe in accidents, don't believe it can happen, and have evidence and sources sometimes trustworthy, sometimes really crap and cranky. So, and the last question I had about how to make a bot, to code a chatbot for here, is what happened when this kind of mind gets networked. And then it was, wow, then you have something to see. Then it's, then I talked with someone else, told me something very interesting about it. And his name is Alan Siegel, and he's also an artist. And he says something that's, I found it really interesting. That what's interesting about those theories is that how they feed upon one another, just like an organism mutating as until we lose touch and where those stories began and how they began. And that the internet plays a big role because of its speeds, but also as a fictional space. Just as easily as it can assemble, it can disassemble rapidly as well. It's fragile connection bridge that produces aura. So you can say that somehow the internet is a good ground for creating fiction, also because it's fragile connection with reality and at the same time the ability to connect with reality. So to finish it all, Joy has, in all those interviews, it's actually her body. She has the ideas and the text of all those people I've been talking with about paranoia, critique, and alertness. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Claudia. And just again, while we get Alessandro and Hans up here wired up, is there anybody who would like to comment on or question anything that Claudia was talking about? No, you, yeah? Hang on.
Sorry. It's actually also a little bit for the other person, but never mind. No, it's just I wonder if conspiracy idea is not also just about the idea that people can lie and that they can have another agenda than that they show you. So that this reality, because your bot is kind of very clearly saying what she is up to. I mean, she tells you that she is about a conspiracy. So that's a little bit not very like the idea of a conspiracy, because it's about that you don't really know what somebody's up to or what they are really trying to achieve or what they want to do. So.
I mean, she's a little too open about herself, in that sense.
Indeed, it's about conspiracy theories is about secrecy. But I didn't like the. I didn't thought it was very interesting to have it, because I wanted to have a discussion going on about conspiracy theory rather than have some conspiracy made up and make people believe that it was true. I mean, there is also I tapped very much into the idea of how, for instance, gossips, they can, if you spread a story, how they can be used to, they just grow on, and they make a story. They even used by companies to, like marketing.
Okay, then thank you very much, Claudia. And let's get our next two gentlemen geared up, wired up. And as we do that, I'll introduce you to. Next presentation is going to be kind of a collaborative presentation performance of sorts between Hans Bernhard and Alessandro Ludovico. Hans is a St. Moritz-based artist whose true madness first surfaced when he started up the internet underground cult eToy back in 1994. Later on in 1999, he and 3 other founding members of eToy bought the mother company, the real eToy Holding, while investing .com money in a Sofia, Bulgaria-based software firm called ASOF Limited. And the next year, they engaged in an interesting project called the Vote Auction, which basically bought and sold votes during the 2000 US presidential elections. This, of course, was not taken as an ironic project, but as a real thing, a real threat to American democracy. And consequently, Hans and his partner Liz Vielex were sued by 12 US states, investigated by the US Federal Attorney Janet Reno, observed by the FBI, by the CIA, and the Austrian secret police, and put under National Security Agency surveillance. So these are things that are quite interesting in ways in which the fiction of an art practice gets you into trouble with the real world of, let's say, corporate and police structures around us. And it goes very much into the meat of the way an artistic practice itself becomes part of a conspiracy-making tool. And Hans will be talking a little bit more in depth about that. Together with Alessandro beside him. Alessandro is the chief editor of Neural, and he's been eavesdropped upon, I would say, probably for over a decade, most of his life, he says, but definitely in the last 10, 15 years, primarily due to his activist cultural activities. Alessandro promotes cultural resistance to the pervasiveness of markets, and he is an active supporter of ideas and practices that challenge the flatness of capitalism through self-organized cooperation and cultural production. So, Hans and Alessandro, thank you very much for coming to Rotterdam, and it's my pleasure to have you here at V2.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks a lot for the invitation to Rotterdam. It's a pleasure. First, I would like to start with some words about the cultural, sort of the conspiracy background. Stephen already mentioned the vote auction. We're going to talk quickly about it, or very briefly. But first, I would like to introduce a project which was done by eToy in 1996. It was called the Digital Hijack. And we hijacked about 1.5 million people from search engines during a 4-month period in 1996. Yeah. So the action was scripted like an internet movie. And as a result, the CIA was involved, and the Austrian Secret Service house searched my apartment 6 o'clock in the morning without a warrant. It was an unofficial collaboration. It was interesting to see how Austrian secret police collaborates on an informal level with the CIA. Actually, just yesterday I saw on CNN that the Austrian police and Secret Service was collaborating with the CIA in transporting secret prisoners through the country, and yeah. But while the agents were in my apartment, they were looking for hard disks and floppy disks, because from our eToy server, a series of death threats against Chelsea Clinton, the daughter of the former president Bill Clinton, were sent off. So during this time, my apartment was full of drugs, and it was a very difficult situation. We finally resolved the situation by handing over false log files, manipulated log files to the Secret Service. But what was actually even worse than the CIA threat was that the University of Vienna censored us. They actually physically pulled the plug from the hijack server during the full action when it was really going. The reason was an email where there was an ASCII gun in the email. This image was enough to kill them off and censor us. The second action I don't have to talk about too much. It's a vote auction. So, as Stephen said, during the presidential election 2000, Al Gore versus George W. Bush, we ran an internet platform buying and selling votes from US citizens. And the slogan was bringing capitalism and democracy closer together. So it was a real media hype. We counted over 2,500 news features globally. And we were featured in a 30-minute CNN primetime show where they discussed the project, and they wanted to find out whether we were what we claimed to be Eastern European business perverts, business people, or whether we were actually artists. The US government spent millions of dollars because immediately the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, and Janet Reno, the federal attorney, and 13 state attorneys started to investigate the case. The problem was they didn't know who we were, and we didn't know who they are. That's the most difficult thing in these kind of situations. They're really spooks. I think that's also a terminology which is used for the CIA, for example. So I hand over to you.
Yeah. With this impressive background of Hans, we met at some point 2 years ago, more or less physically, after many exchanges before, and we started to wonder, to talk about Google. It was the most impressive online giant corporation even 2 years ago. Even that moment is growing constantly. And we were discussing why Google is so impressive, why Google it's so effective. Because it's a very subtle project. For most of the people, Google, it's not a corporation, it's something that comes with a computer. You have the computer, you connect to the net, and you search through Google. It's something that it's even sold with your computer. Most of the people is not conscious that it's the biggest online corporation of ever. Why it was so effective and so quick growing and so pervasive? No doubt Google is the only search engine used by the majority of users. We started to talk about it, and I started to analyze its brand. For me, Google has a very peculiar characteristic, its interface. For me, it's like porcelain. It's perfect. It's shiny. It's funny. It's even like the cup you use during the breakfast. So you feel comfortable with this kind of interface. But you can't see what's behind, what's inside this porcelain interface. And there's another very important characteristic, that it's simple, essential, as a porcelain object could be. And this simpleness and this being essential, is reflected in every Google service and aspect. When they make new services like, you know, Google News, Gmail, Google Images, Google Maps, they are always funny. People like them from the beginning, even not considering that they establish a monopoly on that services in the very moment they make the service public, because of the incredible mass of users of Google itself. And there's another very important policy of Google. We are not talking about something like a Microsoft at all. Google is always working, and working very well. So it's funny, it's really easy to use, you feel comfortable, and it works. Everything is light, quick, speedy, I could say tasty, and resource rich. But again, it's an enormous block that you cannot enter. It's very well protected. You will see how during the next minutes. So we thought about it as, I tried to define it as the funny dictator. A dictator that is really have the monopoly on searches and on many services on internet, but is funny. So you don't have the instinct feeling of fighting against him. But the greatest enemy of such a giant, it's the parasite. The parasite can suck small amounts of energy, in our case of money. And sucking this money would affect this self-referentialism of Google. That is another very specific characteristic. Everything in Google refers back to Google. And we wanted basically to find a way of emptying this artificial mountain of data and its inner risk of digital totalitarianism.
Yeah, so we started a project, and it's called Google GWEI. The name is GWEI, G-W-E-I. Google will eat itself. How does it work? By having a series of over 50 hidden websites carrying little Google text advertisements, we earn money with each click our robot generates. We then transfer the money we receive from Google to our Swiss bank account, where we automatically buy Google shares. So by using this auto-cannibalistic model, Google eats itself, but in the end, we own it. It's also a paradox situation, because by using Google AdSense advertisement, the program, we also contribute in micro terms, to their growth of profit and to the rise of the share value. But it's not so important. But after the buying process, after we bought the shares, we distribute the shares to the public through a company called GTTP Limited, Google to the People Limited. Now, it will take us over 200 years to take over Google, we calculated. So to explain or clarify the piece a little bit more in detail, because there is a technical side to it and a business side to it, we use the core business technology of Google. That's their AdSense program. Next to the AdWords program, the AdSense program is the main revenue generator of Google. They earn billions of dollars per year with these little advertisements. So with the AdSense program, Google places text advertisements on millions of websites Any website can subscribe to this service and earn a little amounts of money or big amounts of money, depending on how many times their users click on the advertisements. So, as I said, we have about 50 such advertisement websites. So each time an advertisement on our website is being clicked, a micropayment between 10 cents to $1 is transferred from Google to us. And then we wait, and then we buy the next share. That's the whole trick. So now we're going to talk about some things that happened during this 2-year. I mean, the project is started in 2005, early 2005. So it's almost 2 years. It's almost 2 years, and it's still running. So we have now about 190 shares, which are valued at about $90,000. That's approximately the thing. So you're going to talk about some stuff.
Yeah, guess what? It worked. But we went during this year and during this couple of years, we went into diverse stages also because of what happened. This was the very first fake website we did. You can see the Google AdSense on the left. We were simply putting in a sort of self-referential style, putting in news about global web marketing and e-business information as a new magazine. To be into the AdSense program, you have to submit your website to Google, and they will say yes or no, we don't want you. They said yes, so everything started. But quite quickly, we start to see strange signals from the outside. Probably the first one, this is how basically it works. This is, for us, an historical moment, the first click to our website that generated
54 or what?
Yeah, 54 cents. The first one was an explicit invitation to Understanding Google, a conference theoretically held at the Ritz-Carlton at Half Moon Bay, California. The head of this conference, Seth Goldstein, invited us and said, why, guys, don't you come and explain us your techniques? Of course, we never went there. We were in doubt for many reasons. One, that we should have been in the belly of the beast. Second, that we weren't really convinced that it was a real conference. There was only a famous speaker, John Battelle, that is one of the most acknowledged Google experts. But the website was so cheap for such a conference, and it was pretending to be a technical conference about Google with work groups inside. But we have to frame also the moment. We are in the moment where the click fraud argument was really picked up by journalists and magazines. And we had long articles in Wired magazine, in Business Week, talking about how this Google bubble was at risk because of click fraud. And we felt the feeling of being really a part, one of the multiple voices in this click fraud economy. So we were not really surprised when Eric Orchard, chief technology correspondent of Reuters from San Francisco, asked us about an interview. We said, yeah, finally, the big media has discovered Google with it itself and its own techniques and politics. It's not just a question of sweet shop in China clicking furiously on AdSense, changing their IP. There's also other stuff to talk about. Here's Eric Ocher. Obviously, he didn't send a photo asking for the interview, but I found it just on Flickr. You can find it also, of course. This is the mail. Can someone contact me? I have some questions about your project. We have a public email that is magazine@gwa.org for filtering all the messages that arrive us because of Google with it itself. And to prove that he was serious, he said, yeah, you can read some of my latest stories on the Reuters website. What happened was that we say, yes, okay, cool, let's start, shoot, send us your question, we are ready. But he simply never replied. A very logical consequence, or illogical consequence, was that after few days, he's asking, 2 of our decoy accounts with Google were suddenly terminated. We thought about the usual policy of professional journalists, that is to ask you and to ask also the counterpart. But it was unclear how it worked, even if probably he asked Google, and Google researched and shut down these 2 decoy accounts.
Yep, just changing. Okay, so
probably we have to explain what decoy accounts.
Yeah, the decoy. We put out some decoy accounts because we wanted to protect our real websites where the actual money making is going on. So what you can do, this is also kind of a defense tactic, which is also, I think, used with the secret services, etc. That you put out something which they can find, and it's in English it's called a decoy, and then they will find it and they will be satisfied with the result that they terminated this, but in the back the whole operation is still running. So that's the decoy account. Another thing which happened was that Wired magazine, the print edition, they contacted us for an interview and a big feature in the art section, and we prepared everything. We did the interview, we prepared the graphics, everything was set. It took about 1.5 months, and they prepare they have 3 or 4 months before printing. They have already the deadline, so it's already crazy there. And the problem was that in the last moment, the article got cancelled, and they didn't tell us any reason. So I tried to find out why, but they wouldn't answer. They just said that they had orders from the top. That was a top-down decision. They couldn't do anything. Now, we quickly had a look at Wired magazine because we knew that they changed hands. So the mother company of Wired magazine is Condé Nast. And Condé Nast is one of the big media companies, publishing. It's a publisher, actually. Now, the publishers have very close relationship with advertisers and media company, and Google is such a media company. So we'll never find out, but whatever it means, it could be related. Another thing which was really, how do you say, it was strange, was that we received a lot of strange fake account, and we couldn't tell from who this is. We received many emails from strange people with strange email addresses, with very strange content. And this became a real problem in the user communication. It started to go out of control. As I mentioned before, it's very hard to judge what a person's intention is if you only have virtual contact via email or via Skype. And if the information gets just overwhelming and you are in a process of real-time publication and user communication press work, you are between the fronts and you can't tell who is who, and if it's corporate spies or lawyers or or just users who are interested and strange. You don't know. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to read you quickly one of these kind of communications which happened via Skype with one of the collaborators of the project, Paolo Girio. It was a chat history with a guy called Johannes Beuys.
Let me just add, for those of you who use Skype, sometimes you get requests of chatting with another person, you have to agree or not. Paolo is the one of us that is for most of the time with the Skype on, so it's the person that has received the greatest amount of requests via Skype about Google with itself. He was contacted by his person. This photograph is quite threatening for me. He was joking, saying, yeah, it really seems like Saddam Hussein. I said, Paolo, calm down. He's in jail. He's well guarded. We are not at this point. And the name also seems real. We'll never know again. But this is a conversation. Hans will refer the Johannes Beuys words, and I will play as Paolo Cirio.
So he goes like, hi.
Hi, dear.
You're the one who coded the Google will eat itself thing?
Yes, right.
Could get you into big trouble.
Why?
Who are you?
Who are
Oh,
you?
that's you? It's not only against the AdSense TOS, but against the law. It's called fraud.
Yeah, okay, see.
That's mine.
Oh, sorry.
See http wikipedia.org/clickfraud.
Yes, I know about this argument, but you don't know what to do, Google, about the law. Do you know what kind of personal information they collect with the AdSense program? So many things are against the law. Anyway, have you something important to tell me?
No, I just wanted to hear if you know what you're doing. Have fun, smiley.
Yes, I know, but don't forget that I'm an artist, not a thief. It's a bit different.
Fraud is fraud, no matter what, if you think it's art or not.
Now, exactly depend what you are doing with fraud. If you use to steal for personal use or for communicating something. So many art was illegal and then become history for everybody.
I'm pretty sure the judge won't think so.
Oh, well, depend who pays the judge. In some, nothing of legal is really legal. Anyway, something it's a must for political activists, and we take the risk.
Okay, your choice. Just wanted to let you know of the risk. That's it.
He quieted, and yeah. This is a kind of scary stuff we got. Well, as Stephen very kindly said, I'm the editor-in-chief of Neural, and Neural magazine is also a Neural website. It is quite popular. The Neural website got 150,000 unique users a month. I took an AdSense account before starting GWay. And I said from the beginning to Hans, I want to take the two things separate. Neural is one thing, Google with itself is another one. I don't want to test it on Neural or mix the two stuff. So don't giving excuses to Google to terminate my account, not only for money reason, but also for having a platform always working. Guess what? Google will terminate my account in Neural, even if I can say no fraudulent click was made. When this happened? Another conference. Some friends in Italy invited us on the coast of Tuscany for a very small festival dedicated to design and new media called Struttura. And they have a good idea. Why don't we put all the fighters in the same ring? Why don't invite Google with itself guys and the Google Italy guys to let them chat together happily. Google Italy simply said, it is not in our public relation plans, and said, we will not come. 3 days before the conference, the neural.it account was terminated. I, as you might guess, tried to ask again why and when, but the Google policy is just terminate. You can ask any more times you want, but the reply usually is always the same. You made fraudulent clicks, you'll be terminated. I want to tell just another very brief thing about this concept of fraudulent click. As Hans was telling before, we had this engines that software engine programmed by Paolo Chigero that was able to make invisible clicks on the Google with itself website. So basically, what we were doing was a simulation of a natural environment, because we really cared of respecting the ratio of clicks and page views. So how many people clicks as average on after visiting a page. So we were simulating this kind of stuff. We were sort of, for us it was a sort of science experiment. It was an environment that we have to simulate again. And it's very difficult to say for sure that you made a fraudulent click. How can you say that? There's a surveillance camera in your room that is seeing when you push your right or left finger on the mouse saying, hey, you have made a fraudulent click, beware. It's simply impossible. It's simple electronic signals traveling from your computer to the Google servers and transforming into very small amount of money. And this kind of, for us, natural environment was by us simulated.
But still, we received a cease and desist letter from Google.
We got mail.
We got mail from Google Hamburg. Quote, we write you in the name of Google Incorporated, 1600 Amphitheatre Parkway, Mountain View, California. Google was informed about your project, GWAI, Google Released Itself. On your website there is the following information. Quote, now we have set up a vast amount of such AdSense accounts for our hidden websites. Each time someone visits a website within our network of sites, he/she triggers a series of robots. For each click, we receive a micropayment from Google. End quote. We're still in the mail. We mean that the text can only be understood that you open up or have other people open up AdSense account with Google. It is obviously the intention that you or others click on the AdSense pages and receive payments for this. For doing this, you also state that you're using robots. We may inform you that this is against Google AdSense policy. It is strictly forbidden to use automatic tools to generate clicks. This policy is not only to protect Google, but to protect the advertisers. They can experience direct losses by your activities. Keyword, Google sorry, start again. Keyword, GWAI eats advertisers. They really wrote that. We don't have to mention the criminal legal implications this project might have for you. We are very well aware that this is an art project. But this, we have to mention, the legal consequences this activity might have for you. Be assured that Google will use all legal means to prosecute such fraud. Usually this does not imply the termination of your not only imply the termination of your AdSense account, but can also mean that you have to pay back your earned money and that we press charges. So you have to pay reimbursement for the bad damages you caused. With kindest regards, Dr. Arndt Haller, Legal Department. End of quote.
just a note to say that even the legal department of Google, it's coherent with their style. They didn't simply send an official and boring lawyer email saying, yeah, this is the law and so on. They say, yeah, okay, we know it's an art project, but please stop it now. It's, again, in their perfect porcelain kind of concept.
Should we end it here?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans and Alessandro. The question is, are you guys victims or victimizers in this whole process?
This is a conceptual piece. I think we're victims,
Ah,
I would say. We're
Yeah,
just artists.
Yeah. As Hans said, it would take 200 millions of years at this rate to really own Google back. So basically, you can't really fight such a giant on his own levels. But the parasites are victims, but in a way they can speak in a system.
did you ever get any response from those supposedly victimized advertisers?
No, never.
They probably
Never, but there was a huge a lawsuit. How's it called? A lawsuit where it's hundreds or thousands of people against the company, and Google already paid about 100 millions to arrange this out of court. So it was an arrangement done. So this is probably because the problem is that click fraud is such a big problem. It's estimated that it's between 30 to 50% of the advertisement online is being clicked or viewed sort of fraudulent. So it's a huge problem for all the advertisements. I mean, Google is also just a representative. In Europe, Google is very strong. It's a monopoly. But in the US, it's together with Yahoo, and it's a little bit broader. So it's not only Google.
Is anybody else who would like to comment or have questions for Hans or Alessandro? Oh, no, that's
No, he's just
photographer's
making a
hand
photo.
going up. But I'd like to get Florian up here anyways. You're raising your hand, so you can come right up. And also Claudia. So can we get this mic working as well?
Well, you didn't say something tonight, which you said earlier, namely that this project was your reaction on other digital art that was based on Google you saw and you found terrible because it was just using Google as a backend and didn't criticize it. So this was your solution of how you can do digital art with Google. Would you say this is the only solution?
I don't.
I wouldn't. If I would know, I wouldn't talk about it. Actually. What do you think?
Yeah, almost the same, I think. But there are many ways. The core is to think about Google not in terms of its own interface, its own services aesthetic, as many artists do, but we break this famous porcelain to see the core, and the core for them is advertisement, because everything else is free, but advertisement is where their 500 to a few days ago share is based, and for us the click fraud was their Achilles heel. Yeah, there should be many, but
maybe the data collection would be something
another
interesting,
one.
but that someone else should do that.
yeah, yeah.
Anybody else? The quiet crowd. Okay, I wanted to get all of you up here just to be able to have a sort of more open and general talk, because there's a lot of things that also overlapped in things that you were talking about, and certainly I think that the notion of the FUD is pervasive in all these presentations and these discussions. So fear, uncertainty, doubt, and it's quite interesting that whenever we get into this subject matter of let's say manipulative practice, or what we may call conspiracy theory in a populist or popular manner, that it's very much tied to American popular culture. I mean, your stuff you were talking about in terms of Roswell is sort of completely sort of American sci-fi culture. The sense of, let's say, fear and unease that is a requirement of all of us around the world by the American government in terms of, let's say, justifying the war on terror. I mean, the notion of FUD could be said is the motto of the American government, and we have to live in this constant sense of fear in order to kind of, you know, survive, I guess, our condition, and to legitimize these power structures. And it would be interesting to hear from you guys. I mean, how does this play out in other cultures, in other contexts? Of course, in Europe, but also, for example, in emerging technological, let's say, empires like India or China, where there's other kinds of mechanisms and power struggles and power plays working.
Well, you referenced the German Spiegel article this morning, and that had a sociological theory about the popularity of conspiracy theories in America, which I don't quite buy into, but maybe I should just repeat it here. They said that because American society is so diverse and consists of so many competing groups, that these groups are always suspicious about each other. I think maybe that is one factor, but another factor for sure is, well, I'm getting on thin ice now, and I'm really exposing myself to criticism here. I would say it seems to me as if cultures that have a positive notion of eccentricity and a higher individualism are also more likely to be dissenting, and therefore also to produce conspiracy theories. And this is why, for example, in, say, sociologically more homogeneous cultures, a conspiracy can happen, but then it can really get out of control, like in Germany in the 1930s, where there was one conspiracy a whole society bought into. Then another thing I would say is, in America, I would say it has really to do also with the religious history of America. Namely the particular kind of Protestantism and Puritanism that very much is influenced by Gnosticism and Gnostic religion. And I could have gone farther back into history in my talk and also talk about Gnosticism and its factual reversal of common religion. It was basically also a religious conspiracy theory. Namely, it said that the Christian God and the Jewish God is not the real God, because the world is evil, and so if the God has created the world, he cannot be good. He must be evil, so God is the devil, and he's not the real God. He's just a sub-God who created this evil world, and there is the real God above him, who is the good God, and that was one of the main religious movements, also underground movements. Around the origins of Christianity, and Christianity took over quite a lot of elements of Gnosticism, also with the idea of you say a Manichaean distinction between good and evil, but the Manichaeans were one of those Gnosticist sect because their leaders was called Mani. Yeah? So they were the followers of Mani. And Puritanic religion, extreme Protestantism, Calvinism, took over these Gnostic ideas rather than Catholicism and more moderate Protestantism. For example, also if we speak about Rosicrucians, Illuminati, Freemasons, they were basically all on the Calvinist side of Protestantism. Then also with Catholic counter-reaction, emulating that model and inventing the Jesuits and the Opus Dei as a counter-conspiracy. But I think it has very much it's very much linked to a history of heretic religious thought that has very much embedded itself into everyday American culture with its very weird religiosity and very weird partisan non-mainstream churches.
I have this the whole time because I'm very I can elaborate very much on it, but like I found a lot of people that would make a relationship between this kind of theories and the build-up of myths. Is it? Yeah? Mm-hmm. The structure of myths. And I see, like, for instance, I come from Brazil, and this kind of, the fear of technology and the idea of UFOs, they're very, very, very related. And also, like, all those stories about how much the CIA knows what's under the ground of in Brazil or whatever. But, like, I ask myself if it's not more universal than just American stories. That's my point. Like every culture has its myths.
But it seems to me as if in Europe there is a stronger tendency of mainstreaming society, and that therefore also perhaps also as a result of the Second World War. Higher that conspiracy theories are under a higher taboo, right? And that, because they easily, just as there is a taboo on nationalism and so on, it doesn't mean that this doesn't exist and that conspiracy theories don't exist, but they are not voiced as openly. Also because there is a lesser free speech ethos in European countries. I would say that the multiplicity of conspiracy theories in American culture have very much to do with the free speech idea, and that you cannot set up your own radio station and make your 24 hours CNN where you just spread weird conspiracy theories, which you simply cannot do in Europe because you don't have that. Yeah. Except free speech laws. Yeah.
Except that just this mainstream though of Europe is also basically the ground in which these let's say art forms of let's say structural dissent in a certain way take place. I mean, GWEI, the work of 01100.org, etc. They're all coming out of a kind of a critical European perspective and all this, and not out of the States. So that's also kind of interesting. But Alessandro, he's got his mic.
No, I have my. I wanted to add just a couple of notes from Italy. That I know that the time of that fits into this European approach. But if I think about Italy specifically, conspiracy theories have always permeated the underground territory, and also were very popular among the leftists. But it was also popular to trying to deconstruct the media mechanism, like the constant emergency, as you said. I remember that even at the beginning of the first Gulf War in '91, there was a group of autonomists in Bologna that sprayed most of the city with this two human figures, and the phrase was "Stop the panic." During the start of real panic, that was because for the first Gulf War we were started to really feel under war at the beginning, and this became also popular to organize party like "Stop the Panic, Let's Dance." So really trying to have fun deconstructing this media mesmerizing attention. And about the fun and playing with this concept, I would also remember, because you were also mentioning 01 and artists like that, another group, Italian group called Guerrilla Marketing, that has developed a video game called What Next that was very controversial in Italy. It raised media attention because it was a simple game based on Google Maps, where you have to predict the next terrorist attack. And you should put a place on the map and say, yeah, for me, it will be here for this reason. The only rule is that it will be, of course, in the future, and there will be 10 deaf people not directly involved in the attack. And the guys from Guerrilla Marketing said that it was extremely popular and take as serious, but also fun at the same time. Also, the point of this work for me is really to deconstruct this continuous emergency in a way that could be manipulated also by everyone, breaking this attention made by mainstream media.
That reminds me actually that immediately after 9/11, the Pentagon invited a whole group of Hollywood screenwriters by action movies. There is this one movie, and I forgot its title. It's with Bruce Willis in New York as the captain of a special troop, and there are Islamist terrorists that smuggle an atom bomb into New York and it explodes. And that movie was made before 9/11. And so the Pentagon really had the idea, well, those screenwriters, they had all these ideas, and they came true. Really, I'm a big fan of action movies, and I saw them all in the 1980s and 1990s, and really what I also thought 9/11, this is like from an action movie, and I've seen this on screen, and now I see it on TV. And so they really had the idea, we take the screenwriters to the Pentagon and let them develop scenarios. What could be next? In order to predict what might be the next threat. And I think actually in that case of that game, the Pentagon should have seized it. They should have adopted it and said, okay, that gives us empirical data. Maybe we can do our strategical planning based on that game. And that, again, this is, I think, typical for the dynamic of something that goes from the underground and the overground and forth and back. I think this seems to be the permanent structure of any conspiracy model.
Yeah, well, rumor has it that Rotterdam is the next hit, being the world's largest oil port.
Today?
So, well, today it is still, and it still is here. But that is just, the rumor as it's going around. So if there's no further questions or commentary, I guess we'll still be here. Thank you very much, Florian, Alessandro, Hans, and Claudia. And for anybody who hasn't had an oracle reading yet in the back there, they're still open. The bar is still open, and thank you very much to Ileana for designing the Armageddon cocktail this evening. Thanks also to Menold on the camera, and to Wilco and Pascal for the technical assistance. Also to Audrey, who is also taking people through the Oracle. And thanks to everybody for coming this evening. And yes, don't forget, we are not alone.
Thank you.